very much for attending our AI for Peace session today. Technology advancement over the past decade has been nothing short of amazing. But at the same time, the gap between those in need and the resources to help those people has never been larger. So how do we change the map? How do we make sure that we can leverage technology to support people in need? So my name is Jordan Robert. I am an enterprise support account manager in AWS, working with the multinational organization Vertical, and I serve the United Nations Secretariat. And I'm joined today by Adam Marlatt, Operation Director at Help That NGO, a crucial partner for work in the field, addressing and supporting various UN agencies across humanitarian, development, and peacekeeping space.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jordan. As Jordan mentioned, my name is Adam. I'm the Operations Director of Help NGO. So we're an international non-governmental organization, and we're also a United Nations standby partner. So one of the unique things that we do is we deploy experts on mission and service packages, including AI-enabled technology, directly into agencies' funds and programs in the UN Secretariat to assist across the triple nexus. So working in conflict with peacekeeping operations, working across humanitarian activities with the World Food Program, and then also into various specialized different agencies and entities like the United Nations Development Program, who we just signed a partnership with this month. One of the key things that we're going to be talking about today is how do we leverage artificial intelligence into operations. We're at a crossroads where it's very complex. The reality is there hasn't been a greater need in the entire world. Right now, we're in a situation where budgets have largely flatlined, but at the same time, we're under pressure to actually come and deliver in more and more locations. This is further exacerbated by conflict that's hitting across different regions, and also the unfortunate reality that climate-induced emergencies are continuing to rise.
So as Adam mentioned, we've been building solutions with AI to basically support a partner in the field. One of the most interesting features of AI is the ability to maximize existing resources and legacy investments in order to avoid costly replacement of equipment of software. This enables, for instance, humanitarian partners to leverage big data on the field, but also to keep peacekeepers safe by enhancing secure communication and situation awareness, use cases that we'll be describing slightly after. So here, when we talk about efficiency, we can look at time-consuming processes, for instance. Right now with AI, you can obviously automate those time-consuming processes and make sure that the staff or UN staff can actually focus on what really matters. This is why, for instance, we've been working on a project to add AI assistant into the daily headcount process, which is extremely time-consuming, removing the burden of security professionals and making sure that they can actually allocate their time on more value-added activities.
Yeah, and I think it's very important that we see that in our work, because the reality is that there's varying degrees of digital literacy that we see across all of the different staff that we interact with. And at the same time, like Jordan mentioned, particularly a focus on open source solutions is very important and critical for our partners. The reality is that there's different procurement mechanisms oftentimes when we're working with local counterparts, especially in governments. So we try to avoid scenarios in which we're tied into any sort of software license or software as a service. So this is one of the critical areas that allows us to really leverage these solutions and effectively put them into operations in the field. One of the things that we really see this being effective with is one of the things that we're going to show and start to talk about in our use cases. So a recent example of this here, this is with the Somalia Special Forces and with the United Nations mission in Somalia. So Jordan and I were recently, earlier this year, conducting a series of working backwards sessions that we're going to touch on momentarily, where we were able to actually work with these customers and understand what their bigger challenges were. So obviously this mission has been around for more than 30 years. They have a variety of different investments from a hardware side of things, but also they have a need to increase and make efficient their operations and also transition aspects of this over to their core counterparts.
So as you can see on the group photo, first of all, I can assure you I am on that picture. Try to find me. But yeah, so basically what we do is called working backward sessions. This is what we love the most to do. So we flew in Somalia and we spent 3 days not only talking about technology. Of course, we showcase some, I would say, amazing use cases implemented by other customer or other multinational organization to inspire. But most importantly, we focus on the challenges. We spend one full day just talking about what they are facing, what challenges are facing, and what challenges are trying to solve. And this has enabled us to build, I would say, digital transformation roadmap with different use cases. I talked about one already, which is automating check-in process, but also connectivity on the move. When you are in Somalia or other location like this, how can you run critical application when you are in the middle of the desert and you have no connectivity? This is doable, and we've been doing it. We also talked about object detection of existing security cameras. We talked about how you can get early warning through social media monitoring. And obviously, we are addressing all those challenges in multiple languages. We're not only talking about the 6 official languages, but all the different that we can hear, for instance, in Somali. This is basically the 2 main sponsors that have been working with us thanks to the support of OICT within the UN. So Paul Irefo, IT Service Management Unit Chief, and Paul Gimsey. This is basically a quote about what I was talking about. When we talk about working backward session, we are not just trying to push for services. If that does not make sense for people on the field, we're not doing it. The only thing that makes sense for us is if we can have an impact on the field, making sure that basically we can support it end to end.
And so now probably what everybody was really looking for, which is what are we actually doing about it? So over the second half of our presentation, we're going to be talking about how we're leveraging some of these innovative solutions to actually help the mission on the ground. So as we mentioned before, we've had an emphasis and kind of focus on how do we leverage low-cost solutions in existing investments. We innovate together in working backwards sessions like Jordan mentioned, and then we focus on basically being able to leverage the existing IT investment that they have, because the reality is there's not often the opportunity for external to budget funding to increase these operations. So obviously, one of the first things that's required is when we look at field operations is how do we actually connect to AI in the first place? It's great that now we have all of these different companies that are creating multiple different solutions, but what does that actually mean if we don't even have internet in the first place, right? So the reality is there's more than 2.75 billion people on the planet that don't have access to internet. And this is oftentimes the same people that are disproportionately affected by humanitarian crises and conflict. So when we're operating in those areas, if we don't have internet in the first place, then what is really the power or the value of AI? Because we can't even connect. So one of the things that we work on there is leveraging existing solutions basically that are already available to market and enabling missions from transferring over from analog technologies like radio for security telecommunications into low Earth orbit and geostationary orbit satellite connectivity that allow us to connect back to the workload. But also, the reality is sometimes we might just have irregular connectivity. So one of the things, and you probably saw in the video, we do a lot of deployments of hybrid edge devices. So when we look at AWS, for example, we use Snowball Edge and Snow Cone devices, which are those large boxes that you see that are ruggedized, that allow us to actually run workloads both on the edge and in the cloud. So in the Somalia example, we're actually deploying these Snowball Edge devices like you can see here, and we're actually running those directly in vehicles. So if they're parked in a location or if there's weather conditions or terrain conditions that block us from getting internet access, we're still able to continue to use those workloads. And basically what that allows us to do is actually work with what's already available on the ground. So we're starting to integrate different things like legacy radio, existing GIS and mapping solution, existing IT layover to be able to actually implement this at scale. So one of the first things that we talked about, that Jordan mentioned, was being able to use Wicker, which is a messaging tool kind of like WhatsApp, Signal, or other sort of devices. And that actually allows us to go in and be able to use this technology and have a direct interface or interaction with our AI tools. So you can see a little bit here in terms of how we interact with Bedrock and then back to the application. So we're demystifying and removing any sort of traditional user interface and going actually directly with the assistive client. So in this particular scenario, we're pulling the data lake, both in terms of sovereign cloud for the UN or GovCloud in the US. We're running Bedrock, and then we're able to directly interact based on different operations and focal points. So one of the key things that we have here is obviously with the United Nations Safety Management System. So basically the foundation of all security, and that's where we do kind of a head counts and check-in. One of the other things that we do is that hybrid interaction and back to the cloud. So we have radios that are used in different critical missions all around the world. But what we can actually do is we use radio over IP to be able to drive that back and then sync that information. So when we're in a convoy, some of that traditional technology is now being able to run directly on the edge, but then also back to the cloud. And so this allows us to integrate situational awareness and other tools, which I'll talk about in a second, directly back. So we're able to pull from that localized data source that's sitting on the edge, we're able to update it in the cloud, and then we're able to interact tools back to it that allow us to get real-time user feedback, both in terms of those that are monitoring, so we can see, okay, a vehicle is out of a location, or a sensor has gone off and there's river flooding, so we divert that convoy before it gets stuck in the first place. And so that's one of the things that we've emphasized heavily with situational awareness. So we're currently deployed in multiple different continents with the United Nations Department of Safety and Security. And one of the key things that we're doing is we're leveraging static video cameras that are legacy items, drones, and sensors that are on vehicles to actually be able to provide real-time updates and reduce risk for staff. And so one of the key ways that we do this is with an open source platform that's called TAC, which is Team Awareness Kit, which we're able to run in the cloud, and it doesn't require any sort of licensing fee. So this interacts back with Wicker, also with the AI client, and some of our external tools that we have, both in terms of drones, IoT sensors, and satellite connectivity. And so this allows us to integrate all of the different elements that we have, from vehicles to personnel that are on foot to assets that are in the air, to have one combined picture and one constant update of what's happening. So if we're in a situation we're flying over and we see that there might be an ad hoc checkpoint that's been set up, we might be able to reroute a convoy in the first place before we ever have any barrier to that operation being able to continue. We're also leveraging object detection and aspects of artificial intelligence to infer potential situations and directly interact, both in terms of Wicker and an application for an update, but then also we're vocalizing that in multiple languages all at one time, which basically allows us to say, okay, we've received an alert. It's going to text somebody, hey, there's a problem in that convoy. You should pause because there's a blockage to the road. At the same time, it's going to vocalize that, go on to different radio channels in different languages, and then give everybody that update directly over their analog radio, where they might not even have connectivity. And that's where we talk about live translation, which is the exact same thing. So here we're using and leveraging Amazon Translate, Transcribe, and Poly to be able to push that information out directly digitally and also via radio.
Yeah, so we are running out of time, so unfortunately we won't be able to go through all the different slides. What we wanted to explain here is really think the complexity of AI. What we're doing as AWS, of course, is providing services to help you build whatever you want. But in some cases, you do not have the time or the resources to build a solution. That is why we are also working with partners like Help That NGO or with professional services in AWS to build this solution on your behalf and enable and upskill your team, making sure they can actually leverage on the solution right away. And as I said, I think we're unfortunately out of time. So what I would like to do is thank you very much for your attention. We do have a booth right behind here. So if you want to know more about each of the use cases or how we can actually help you migrate with programs or specialists, we'll be more than happy to do it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.